Hello everyone, my name's Dooley, VP for a business called Rapid7. Hopefully our marketing team have been capturing you on the way in and giving you lots of really good swag. For those of you that are hoping to see an awesome PowerPoint presentation, unfortunately, you're in the wrong place. No slides today. What we're going to be going through is we're going to have a chat with my guest Jamie, who just took a couple of years off my life as he had not appeared at the right time, but he's here now. And so the topic we're going to go through is really, are we safe, right? And I think for those of you in the room that are practitioners, this is probably something that you get asked regularly, especially as, you know, through the recent time we've had lots and lots of front page news. We've had Claire O'Neill banging away in terms of we need to make our society a safer place. Difficult question, and so what I thought I'd do is kind of go through some scenarios and really workshop out what this can look like. I want this to be interactive at the end, something that's probably a little bit unusual in these breakout sessions. So we're going to talk sort of for 20, 25 minutes or so, maybe 30, and then we're going to throw open to the room. So if you've got any questions in terms of how we go about answering this, please feel free to ask those. I would like to introduce our special guest today, Jamie, who is very kindly offered to help us out. And a great way to kick it off, I think, Jamie, is just give us a little bit of a background in terms of your own experience sort of in cyber.
No worries. Thanks, Rob. So yeah, my name is Jamie Gillespie. I've been working in dedicated cybersecurity roles for about 22 years now. Moved down from Canada to Australia about the time. Started off at AusCERT, actually working in AusCERT as an analyst. So that actually gave me a really good opportunity to spend time concentrating on knowing everything around security, knowing the threats, knowing the vulnerabilities, analyzing the information and assisting the members, the media, the general public in that, without having to worry about, oh, now I need to go and actually do some hands-on security work and take me away from staying up to date and being aware of what's going on. So that was 8 years. That was an amazing sort of catapult for my cybersecurity career. Few moves after that, and I've ended up at APNIC now, been there for about 6 years as a senior security specialist. During COVID times, I actually had a lot less travel that I could do. Spent a lot of time working on internal security in the organization, got us over the line for ISO 27001, as well as some technical security uplifts as well. And now I'm back to travel, going around Asia Pacific, working with countries, working with developing economies, law enforcement, network operators, governments, on making their networks, making their countries and economies more secure, setting up national computer emergency response teams or CERT teams, and law enforcement on the cyber investigation side of things. So yeah, seeing a lot around the Asia Pacific region at the moment.
Jamie, if you can't answer this question of how are we safe, with 22 years of experience in you know, industry association, service provider, client side, international relations, I think nobody can. So look, I think everybody in the room's probably had this, you know, and even at a personal level, you've probably had it with your family members going, hey, are we safe? Now, there's no such thing. Right? It's really a risk discussion, right? So can you walk us through this, right? When your executive come to you and go, hey, are we safe? How do we answer that?
Yeah, well, hopefully it's not a hallway conversation. I've had that one a couple of times. It's not something that you can just answer quickly. You know, they're wanting a yes or no answer. They're wanting a yes answer, in fact. And it's the matter of going down to all of the risks. It's a matter of looking at all of the systems that you have in place. It's a matter of looking at the security culture that you have within the organization as well. Because, you know, as the stereotypical statement is security is everybody's business, and it really is. It matters across the entire organization of what the culture is like, along with the risk assessments, along with the technical and other layers of security that you have on there. But yeah, it's not so much a matter of are we safe, it's are we more safe now than we were a month ago? It's not a matter of are we safe and are we complacent? It's where are we planning to go? How are we going to improve our security posture as things goes on. Because as new vulnerabilities come out, as new threats and threat actors come out, that's going to be driving your level of security down. If you do nothing, it will degrade over time. So you have to be going for this continuous improvement and benchmarking that against what you've been doing in the past.
I think you've got a really interesting perspective on if some people in your organisation, I think you probably shouldn't ask this question to. But I also think there's a disconnect in every organisation. So every board will have a risk register and a risk matrix, right? Where they go, okay, what's the likelihood, what's the consequences? I don't think it's common that the SOC team would know what the board's risk matrix looks like, right? So what's a risk for them may not be a risk, there may be a risk that you guys will take that they will find it unacceptable, or vice versa, you're overcompensating.
Yep.
So what's your experience in sort of getting that alignment across the organisation from board all the way through to SOC?
Yeah, it's a matter of keeping the communication sort of segmented and translating as it goes through. You never want the board to talk directly to the SOC analysts, because a good SOC team or security team in general, you want them to say, no, we are not secure. You do not want them to be complacent. You want them to identify all of the weaknesses, all of the areas for improvement, and to be constantly working on that improvement. So you want them to always say, no, we are not secure, but you don't want that answer going directly to the board, because that's not what they want to be hearing.
Unless you want some more budget.
Yeah. So you want to be then filtering that information up as it goes through, getting that information into some sort of maybe a security-specific risk register, which can then be boiled down into something that goes up to the enterprise risk register and goes up to the board. But similarly, it can be useful for that information that finally makes it to the board to then filter back down again, so that people can understand what the board is actually seeing. If you have too many layers within your organization, it may get rewritten and translated as it goes up, and it may actually lose some of its true message. So the people that are more at the coalface, their true intent is not making it to the board message.
Cool. Insurers quantify risk, put a price on it. Right? So if you ask this question, are we safe to an insurer at the moment? Probably the answer is no, because your insurance premiums are going up. So what's your experience there?
Yeah, the insurance premiums is an interesting one. I know at the conference we've got some presentations that are going on, some this morning even, talking about cyber risk. My personal experience, we went through and we're tendering for new cyber insurance. We still can get cyber insured. There's some news stories going around that you can't get cyber insurance right now. It's too hard or too many exclusions. From my side, we can get it, but they make you go through a lot more process. We went through with a insurance broker, and we got a questionnaire from them that was like 5 times longer than anything we've got from a single insurance vendor before, asking a lot more specific questions. Before, you could do a little bit of smoke and mirrors, and yeah, we have antivirus in place, and that's literally the words that they're using. Whereas now they're getting very specific in what are you using? Is it endpoint detection and response? Do you have incident response plans and playbooks and that? So the cyber insurance is still possible, but they're doing their due diligence as much as organizations should be doing it internally as well.
Excellent. I love the expression, never waste a good crisis. So, for the people in the room, everyone would have been asked this question, are we safe? And we've seen Medibank, Optus, etc. Right? Was there a chance there to use this to good effect in terms of improving your posture and improving your control points? Yeah,
well, the only thing better than not wasting a good crisis internally is not wasting someone else's crisis. The Medibank, Optus, all of the others, as long as you weren't working for them specifically, capitalizing on that incident, capitalizing on how that was impacting people personally, and how you can then translate that to organizational risk and not just to the personal risk that Optus customers or Medibank customers would have been feeling. But yeah, you definitely want to use that and carry that forward. Using that as examples of what can go wrong, using that as examples of making sure that you have a good visibility over your system, specifically for, was it Optus? No.
APIs.
Optus that had the API and that. Yeah, one test server that had unfiltered, unmetered API access that actually went to a production database. There was a few little points of failure that just lined up perfectly and was a huge incident. Finding that sort of a thing on your own systems can be really difficult. But if you can learn from other people's mistakes, it's like, we need to have better visibility. We need to be looking down into these little things. We need to have better procedures for our developers spinning up test instances, and what are they actually going to be accessing.
You've just gone into visibility, and look, at Rapid7, we break security down into kind of two pieces, right? Like there's the risk piece up the front, and then you're going to have a hack, like there's a threat. It's kind of how the portfolio is built. In terms of the risk and the visibility, it's tough, right? Because you now got sort of ephemeral networks where you've got containers spinning up. As you mentioned, you've got multiple third parties that will have access to it. And this is difficult. So that visibility question, walk me through what a CISO should do now, or to answer that question with risk from a visibility perspective.
Yeah, well, it's really difficult because it's not just a matter of balancing that with risk, but also balancing that with budgets and having decreased budgets that are available. It's nice to hope that we can get more money for security, but sometimes we don't. It's really about having that visibility across all systems. And it's not just the old school having a network scanner, having some agents on systems. We're dealing with cloud-based services, serverless applications running, and sometimes on multiple cloud infrastructures as well. Not just having it on AWS or not just doing it on Azure or Google, but sometimes all three or even more than that. And it's a matter of having systems in place that can talk across all of your infrastructure, no matter where it is, no matter what systems it is, bringing the information in and actually doing something useful with it. If there are tools that can do that you have already, that would be great. If not, looking at the budget, looking at ways that, do we have money to buy a point solution for this? Or maybe we could write something internally that can collect the information and analyze it and look for changes that are outside of our policies.
Everyone here would go, hey, I just don't have enough budget. Common theme we hear all the time, right? And there's some tough economic times coming, so I think budgets are going to be tighter and harder. Right? What's the advice to manage that risk and say, hey, we're safe with a tighter budget?
I'm seeing so many organizations that have products and solutions in place, but they are not using them to their fullest extent. They're not using them to where they should be using them, and they're having gaps in their security posture because of it. This can actually be turned around. This can actually turn into a bit of an HR training and professional development aspect, where if you can find the time for your staff to do training on these products to really get the most use out of what you've already paid for, that's going to be the best way to spend the money. Especially a lot of vendors, like even Rapid7, have a lot of training that is free. It's online, accessible. There's the paid ones for the in-person, like live courses and stuff like that. But if you just want, on-demand recordings and documentation, it's great, and most vendors will have something like that available. It's a matter of making sure that your staff are trained to get the most use out of what you've already spent money on.
Sure. Rapid7's been a big advocate for open source. We've got Velociraptor, Project Heisenberg, a number of other assets. Fit for purpose in a corporate environment? What's your view?
If you have limited budget and you need more solutions that are out there, open source can fill some of those gaps, absolutely. It may require a little bit of programming effort to make sure it's customized or working properly in your environment, but the cost for that would be a lot less than some of the larger point solutions that you're going to be buying. Nothing against any of the vendors that are, here advertising their wares and stuff like that, but different organizations will have different budgets. If you have the money for good solutions, absolutely. Go find the best thing that's going to be fitting and working with the rest of your systems. But if you don't have the money, there are some open source solutions or heavily discounted solutions that are out there and available.
Cool. Now, we talked about the risk. Let's talk about the threat. Right? Everybody here has had a breach. Right? So tell me about how do we answer that question from a threat perspective, like when the event has happened, right? So, threat, what happens when you have been breached and they come and say, hey, are we safe?
Yeah, no, that's a big one. I was actually working at Google at the time that there was the Operation Aurora, or the Aurora incident, where it was hacked by China and everything. That was a huge kick for Google at the time to do a massive security uplift. We had Larry and Sergey that would actually come into the war room and say, what do you need? And it's like, we need more staff. It's like, great, hire 1,000 people. It's like, dude, we're only 300 now. We don't even have staff to the interviews. They said, well, double the team, do whatever. Just, you want more people, you've got blanket approval, go and do it. I think it was Larry that came into the war room one time with a jar of honey and said, oh, I heard you could use a honey pot. And it's like, yeah, that's funny, right? But it's like you said before, don't waste a good crisis. And there was a lot of changes that came from that. But for a lot of organizations, it's not until you have an incident that you realize where your failings are. And this is where going through exercises, even if it's just starting with tabletop exercises, and exercising your incident response plan, exercising your playbooks, and even exercising the lack of playbooks. What do your on-call people do at 2 o'clock in the morning when they don't have a specific playbook to follow for whatever it is that's happening at that time? So you have to make sure that you've got the documentation and you've got something that's sort of a stopgap for the unexpected that you didn't know was possible, and what are they going to do at that time, and just exercise it, test it, test it, test it.
Gartner came out recently with a future of SOC, and they said, look, the days of organisations having 100% in-sourced SOCs, unless you're a very large organisation, are numbered. Right? So what's your view in terms of improving that posture, in-source, outsource?
Yeah, a hybrid approach is something that can work really well for that. You've got your internal people that really know the infrastructure, know the systems really well, know the staffing and everything, but don't want to be working 24 hours a day. And then you get your outsourced SOC that can sort of handle that overnight. Again, you go back to having documentation, documented incident response, documented playbooks, and then the hybrid team can handle all of that and only escalate the things that really go beyond what you've already been thinking about. But it takes forethought. It takes thinking about the bad things that can happen and how are we going to respond to it. And not just a narrow path, but how can things even deviate just slightly from that. But yeah, a hybrid team is something that can be very useful, where you still have some control internally, but you get that 24-hour, 7-day coverage from them. Seeing that not just in security teams, but network teams. SOCs and NOCs can benefit from that hybrid model, and you may realize that your NOC is already doing that sort of thing, just adopting the same sort of system for a SOC as well.
Cool. How much threat intelligence is too much threat intelligence?
Too much threat intelligence is when you can't properly analyze it and use it in your current environment. If you're getting email and not reading it, then that's too much threat intelligence. If you're getting threat intelligence coming in an automated fashion, but your SIEM or whatever other systems you have can't digest it and can't use it, that's too much threat intelligence. You're going for quantity over quality, and you're going to be failing at that point in time. So you want to make sure that your threat intelligence is useful, that it's useful for your environment, useful for your industry, and actually useful in your technical tools.
Fantastic. All right. Going for about 20 minutes here, so we'll open up to the floor very shortly. We've covered risk, threat intelligence, the operating model. Right? Hopefully our execs are now feeling more comfortable that we're safe. Mm-hmm. Wrap it up. What are your kind of your summary points? How do we answer this question?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is making sure that you've got visibility. Making sure you've got visibility across all of your systems. Making sure that with that visibility, you can actually do some sort of measurement to it, and then continuous reporting and have a plan for improvement from going forward. If you don't have all of those steps in place, you're going to have a failing at some point. If you don't have the visibility, you're going to be flying blind. If you don't have plans for continuous improvement, it's just going to degrade over time.
Fantastic. All right. Hopefully that's been helpful. Hopefully when your execs come in and they wander through and go, hey, cyber guy, are we safe? Like you feel a little bit more prepared there. We have an expert, 22 years, client-side, industry, service provider. I'm really hoping that we can make this a collaborative forum here. Are there any questions for Jamie in terms of how we can answer this question? Are we safe?
We have one from a virtual participant. Just wondering, how do you respond to, but we're ISO certified, but how can we not be safe?
Having just gone through ISO 27001, I know exactly what that is. That is policies, that is procedures, that is having the ISMS here, Information Security Management System. It is not specific for technical controls. It sometimes can be a failing on the way that the ISO certification has been sold to management. If you sell it as the magic bullet to make us secure, yeah, of course you're going to end up with that question afterwards. It's like, why do you need money for this new product or tool? I thought the certification was supposed to be the thing to keep us secure. So if anybody can go back in time, make sure you sell it to the board properly. Make sure you sell the work for ISO certification properly, and that it is not the silver bullet. It is just a really good mechanism to get us in the right direction. But the technical aspect is something that really has to be looked at for it.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. It's Ijaz from Air Services. Just following on that, having the ISO and then are we safe question. What's your view of having ISO or any other technical control, for example, SOC or ISM from the federal government perspective, and the impact of that one on the insurance policies? Does it make it harder? Does it make it basically easier to bring down some of the security, you can say insurance premiums and all that stuff? What's your take on that?
Yeah, it's it's from my personal experience, but it's hard because when we got ISO 27001, which was just last year, we were on already a ramp up of our premiums and things like that. We knew insurance was going to be going up. It did make it easier. The questions they were asking, it wasn't so much we could tick the box saying we have 27001 certification, but the things we had to do to make sure that we were audit ready for 27000 allowed us to tick more boxes. So it's useful to have the piece of paper, but as long as you don't smoke and mirror it along the way and you actually properly do the work for certification, that's going to have a larger benefit than just the piece of paper. The piece of paper shows that you've done it to external people. But yeah, the work that we went through at least was very beneficial for our overall security posture. We still have more to do. It's as I said, it's not the end goal sort of thing, but it definitely helped with our cyber insurance renewal. Yeah.
Just another one from one of the participants. Jamie, in your opinion, do you believe CISOs are articulating the cyber risks to the board well, and any other further tips?
That's a hard question without sitting in board meetings and listening to each of the CISOs and how they're saying it. So I'm not going to talk bad about people when I don't know exactly what they're saying. But I will turn it around a little bit. Not 100%, because you can never be 100% for anything, but I think board members need to be educated more in cyber risk and risk strategies and just the reality of what we're having to deal with down more at the coalface for things. And it's not just so much understanding the risk, but understanding security so that they can ask the right questions. Sometimes they'll be hard questions, but if the board is not asking good security questions, they don't have good security knowledge. Because I don't think any CISO going to the board will completely answer all of their questions preemptively. So education to the board, I think, is something that will be there. And I think, there's the directors associations and things like that. I think they're working on security education. So.
The Australian Institute of Company Directors are, but one of the challenges all boards face, the average board pack at the moment is 800 pages.
Yep.
Right? That's the average. That's statistically what it is. So in terms of getting, and then if you look at the priority, with most board meetings, they'll start at HR, then look at a sales function, right? Because they sort of think, are the people safe? Are we going to sell? Right? And just getting cyber up the priority list is difficult. Right? Yeah. And then we talk around how much airtime you're going to get when there's 800 pages and there's all of these other items. Yep. But hopefully, I think we're seeing that change in light of some of the recent challenges as well.
Yep. Especially if the board members were Optus customers or Medibank customers.
Yeah. How you feel?
There we go. Whoa. Hi, Rob. Thanks, Jamie. Thanks for talking about visibility. Disagree very slightly with not exposing the SOC analyst to the board member, only because I'd like to see them all aligned on the key organizational cyber risks. And that transparency is an important component of building trust, and probably I want to build trust if I want somebody to believe my answer, are we safe? But the question is, what are the 2 or 3 key metrics that you think would be interesting both to a SOC analyst and also to a board member to kind of measure an organization's cyber maturity?
That's a hard one. There's entire books written on how to measure anything and how to measure business risk and how to measure security risk. It's on my to-do list to read that book, but I'm not completely there, so I'll have to give a partial answer for that one. Different metrics for different organizations on their maturity scale for where they are for security. For some of the mature organizations, it might be a matter of time to detect, time to respond, and time to get incidents closed off. Depending upon the number of incidents, that can be hard. Some of these numbers can drag out a little bit depending upon exactly how the incident plays out. So just adding all the numbers together and averaging them isn't going to be great, but looking at some of the larger incidents, looking at the timelines and condensing that down as to, time to detect, time to respond, time to recover, can be a useful thing to work on improvements. At the end of every medium to large incident, at least, there should be that follow-up phase. Looking back to the incident, how can we then improve on things to make detection and response and recovery faster in the future? Because the compromises are happening faster, so if our detection, response, and recovery is not happening faster, we're going to be losing out. And yeah, I take your point. Obviously I have to condense things into short sound bites and stuff. And in my mind, when I'm talking about not letting the SOC talk to the board, it's about having a SOC that is very open about the fact that we are not secure. And you do have to be careful with that language, who you're talking to about, no, of course we're not secure. And it's like, but we spent all this money. So, you could prep the SOC team into how to communicate with the board members and, don't use the language we use behind closed doors as a SOC team when the people in suits come into the room, sort of thing. But yeah, you absolutely, you're right. You can have the SOC talking to the board for specific topics and, not just kitchen conversation and talking the same way that they do in closed doors.
Can I give the vendor's response to that question? Did a presentation about 3 or 4 years ago, and Cisco produced their kind of a threat report, right? And said, hey, on average, the average enterprise SOC gets 100,000 alerts a day. Right? And then everyone in the room would have gone through this phase where there was alert fatigue. And I think these days, with the advent of AI and from a vendor perspective, the development of the tools, context has become king, right? And so I think the vendor community is getting much, much better at going, hey, rather than 100,000, and in our own case we go, We do vulnerability management. We also do threat intelligence. Okay, so we're really good now going, yes, you've got 100,000, 5,000 vulnerabilities. Here's the ones that are exploitable. Here's the ones that have been exploited, and we use obviously we use a honeypot network. We make that data available to everybody free of charge, right? And then if that were to happen in your organisation, this is the potential impact. So I don't think we can summarise it down to the 3 key metrics, but I think what's really, really important is providing the context to the organisation, and I think that's what a good vendor is now doing. Not volume, right? Not we pick up everything, we've got the most amount of data. Let's go, hey, what's meaningful to your organisation? What will be the impact to your organisation? Right? And that's, I don't want this to be a pitch, but that's really where we're investing. Right? That's, I think, where the vendor community as well is going to.
Thanks. I'll try and cover off a couple of questions from online here in condensed in one if I can. I guess people are wondering, how would you, in dealing with boards or senior execs, what would your sort of elevator pitch be to be able to sell, firstly, I guess, sell your security and put them at ease, and any questions that you would hope that they would ask you?
Yeah, that's a good one. I've been training our board to not ask too many questions because I've been answering them in advance. It's also tricky for APNIC's board because they're geographically diverse, so I don't actually see them wandering around the office very often. In fact, they're there right now. Yeah, so elevator pitch is basically, what are we doing? What are the goals that we have recently accomplished and what are we working towards? Because showing that we're always moving, we're always doing more and carrying on with it, because that's going to lead to, yeah, we do still need budget. We're not stagnating, we're not, happy with our certification that we've got, and we are moving forward for it. Questions that I want them to ask, how is security enabling the new products and the new expansion of the business? How is security actually helping the rest of the organization and not just being the department who says no? That's not specific to APNIC. That's just we try not to be the department who says no. But yeah, asking those questions about service back to the wider organization.
As a CISO who's flying back early tomorrow morning to present to the board, I really appreciate where you say that there's also a level of education that they need, because when you walk in and you've only got 5-10 minutes, it's very hard to tackle an issue that you'd really appreciate an hour, and you've got 10 minutes, and without that education it's hard. But what I want to come back to is exactly what you were speaking about just then. So I've run SOCs, and I've run SOCs that get hammered by very nation states and things. Where I struggle though is it's easier to quantify the nation state threat actor than it is to keep up with an IT department who can buy things and turn them on quicker than we can scale at the same pace. We might have at one point had great visibility, but then you've turned around in this wonderfully cloud-enabled environment. I'm finding it shift now to network discovery and, finding all of the, and this is not legacy. I mean, legacy and shadow ICT is a whole different bucket. It's that rapid mobility and keeping scale, and from what I see in cybersecurity is that success in visibility. It is very hard to get funding for a switch box when you're going up against a new desktop that the senior management is going to get, and that's going to be really cool. Yep. What's your advice? So you do want to be, I've never worked in a cyber team, and I challenge anyone to, if they're different, like we are coming out with that, we want to be an enabler, but we're running at a sprint, but we still can't keep up with a business now who can, and they're often sold a lot of Kool-Aid on, well, we do cybersecurity for you. And so they do think they're buying secure products, and we're moving to AWS. AWS is very secure, until we build it. What's that advice you give back to? Can you give us in how do we actually really get like IT on board?
Yeah, the most success I've had is embedding the security team, at least one or two people, into what we have as a technical coordination group, where we bring the different technical groups, whether they're developers or the actual operations team, having these regular technical coordination meetings and getting a security component into there. If you're not bringing the technical people together already, that can be useful just for their own purposes, but then having the ear and sometimes the speaking slot in there about, hey, you're talking about something new, that needs the security review, and getting into the processes where they're doing the discussions, because hopefully the new systems are not just being spun up without some sort of discussion. Hopefully it's not just one individual person who's like, yeah, I'm gonna fire this up and run it and see what happens. So if you can get them discussing and get in on that, it can be useful. What you were describing sounds exactly what APNEC and others are going through. It's like, hey, this ChatGPT thing can really help us with productivity. And it's, yeah, but, and then the follow-up is, well, can we run a GPT large language model internally? And it's like, oh my God, yeah, maybe, but not yet. Can we have a discussion about this? Can we look at it? And that actually was a perfect question to go back to our technical coordination group, because it was a decision that needed to be made. Whenever we look at a new server software to go out, changing operating systems, even programming languages, where someone says, oh, hey, there's this new language, we want to try this, how are we going to do it? Having a technical coordination group that actually does those discussions and making sure that people go through that. It's nice to try and do that carrot. I guess the other way is having the policies as the stick for, if you do something that doesn't go through the discussion and the approval model, there's going to be some consequences to this. It's not a great thing when you have to go through the disciplinary chain for people doing things when they shouldn't be. But having the policies, making sure people are educated about the policies on why we don't want people just spinning things up, but making sure that they're not being limited in their own improvement, their own development cycles and things like that. But yeah, it's definitely a hard one. Every organization is going to be a little bit different on how they operate those things. Good luck tomorrow.
Good luck tomorrow, and I'd just like to say thank you very much. Thank you very much to Jamie for coming in. Always can be a little bit intimidating, I think, being amongst your peers and going through your own experiences. So thank you for volunteering to come up and
no worries, my
say,
pleasure,
this
Rob.
is how we've done it. Thank you for the opportunity today to present as Rapid7, and we look forward to working with you all potentially over the future. And if you'd like to come and visit us, obviously, in the hall, we'd appreciate that as well. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rob.
That's it for today.
And on behalf of everyone in the room, some thanks for everyone here.
Oh, excellent.
It's a monopoly.
Thanks, Greg.
Take the gamble. Excellent. Thank you.
Thanks.
See you today. Bye now. Well done.